All right, everybody. We got a small group. I'm going to get started because I don't want to penalize people who are here on time for people who are not. So hopefully you can hear me. And again, my name is Frank Terlep, and welcome to today's session related to ADAS services and calibration opportunities. And you'll notice on the first screen, hint, it's not just about the targets. I say that because over the last couple of months, our company's received lots of phone calls from lots of companies who are bought targets that said, Frank, I'm going into the calibration business and ADAS services business. And I proceed to have a conversation with them that says, well, just because you have targets doesn't mean you can be in the calibration business. So we're going to talk about several aspects of what we believe and what several people in the industry believe are some of the requirements to really run a proper professional ADAS services and calibration business. So today's session is being brought to you by our company, Auto Techcelerators. And for those of you who don't know, what we do is we help the automotive, collision glass, insurance, and truck industries properly estimate, properly calibrate, and properly validate ADAS systems, repairs, and calibrations. So let's jump into the agenda. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about everything from opportunities and challenges to the facility, to tools, workflow, pricing, getting paid. And we're not going to talk about pricing per se in terms of pricing in the marketplace, but what are some of the ways you can organize, or a business can organize their pricing. We're going to talk about software. One of the things that we found out a couple of years ago when we jumped into this business is there really is, and there still isn't, any software designed for this type of business. So we're going to talk about what we believe the needs are. We're going to talk about documentation. We're going to talk about liabilities. And liabilities, when you talk about ADAS, remember, acceleration, braking, and steering. So if one or two or three of those things don't work, someone's going to be liable for something. We're going to talk about the investment, the potential investment to get in the business. And then we're going to do a short ROI at the end. Now, as we go through, if you have questions, do me a favor, put them in the chat. And as you put them in the chat, they'll sit there until we're done. But as I go along, any questions that you come up with, put them in the chat. Also, last but not least, I think you heard in the beginning, we're recording this session. So if you're here or you're registered, you should get a link to this video within the next 48 hours or so. So let's move on forward and let's talk about the opportunities and the challenges first. So today, from a vehicle perspective, there's about 80 million ADAS equipped vehicles on the road in North America. Now, this is an old slide I used for many years, last 3 or 4 years. Beginning this year, the OEM manufacturers have a verbal agreement with the government to ensure that most, if not all, of their vehicles are equipped with some type of ADAS, mostly automated emergency braking. But if you look at the news, if you read automotive news, if you pay attention to ADAS, not very many vehicles today are being manufactured without some type of ADAS on them. All right, now let's talk a little bit about the car park. So again, we talked about 80 million vehicles on the road today, 2022, based on pure entry of vehicles into the market, new vehicles into the market. And again, if you look at the number, it looks like between 14 and 15 million a year on our numbers, maybe 16 million, a couple of them. We're going to get to 131 million ADAS equipped vehicles by 2025. And by 2030, over 200 million. And when that happens, 75+% of the car park will be ADAS equipped. So again, it ain't going away. ADAS is not going away. And whether it's an ICE vehicle or an EV vehicle, it's going to be there, particularly with EV vehicles. You're going to have a lot more ADAS components on an EV than you are going to have on ICE. So there's a little bit about the car park. Now let's talk about what we believe the actual calibration opportunity is. And again, this is a very conservative estimate on our part, okay? So again, you look at 2022, about 30% of the car park, about 80 million. We look at about 3.6 million calibration opportunities, excuse me, about a revenue opportunity at $1 billion. Now, again, we're getting to that number. We're pricing an ADAS calibration at an average price of $300. And again, for those of you who are in the business, the calibration prices range much more than 300. But again, we're using a conservative number of $300 as an average. Also, we're using an accident calibration of 0.043, which is also conservative in nature. And we're basing the number of calibrations locations needed based on a location that can perform 5 or more a day. So again, you could look at this graph here, or this grid, and again, you can see 2025, it's a 1.7 billion business. 2030, it's a $3 billion a year business, and you can look to the right. And those are the thousands of calibration businesses we think that are going to be in business over the years. Okay, so that's the opportunity at a very, very high level. Now let's talk about some of the challenges our industry faces with regard to ADAS services and calibrations. Challenge number one, location, location, and location. What does that mean? Well, based on industry data today, okay, 80% of collision repairs do not have the required space to properly perform ADAS calibrations. And I would venture to say 80 to 85% of mechanical repair facilities do not have the space to perform proper calibrations. So that's a challenge. If you don't have the space, where are you going to do the calibrations? Well, now there are some people who say they can do calibrations in the parking lot. I'm a believer that you can't do proper calibrations in a parking lot, okay? There are some people that believe you can shrink the targets and perform a proper calibration. Until someone shows me the scientific algorithmic numbers that prove that, again, I'm from Missouri, you got to show me. So that's number one. Location, 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 the shops don't have the space. Challenge number two, equipment. And again, calibration systems need targeting, diagnostics, alignments, lifts, more. And there's a ton of people out there in the business today. But number two is equipment. You got to buy the equipment. And we're going to talk about the investment towards the end of today's session. Then you need personnel, right? You need personnel who are detail-oriented. They don't have to be master technicians, but they need to be detail-oriented. And for those of us who are in the collision industry, the industry is having a hard enough time finding core employees, body and paint, refinish, estimators. And this is another challenge for them in terms of personnel, okay, as well as training, by the way. Let's go on, more challenges. Challenge number four. I've talked to a lot of businesses today, big, small, and in between. And today there are no good, well, I shouldn't say there are no, there's maybe one or two, but most of the businesses I'm talking to today are using 5 or 6 or 7 different systems to try to manage and operate the business. From a sales and marketing perspective, from scheduling, communication, documentation, invoicing, QC, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a challenge. And by the way, the great thing about our industry is the mother, necessity is the mother of invention. And we've got a lot of creative, quote unquote, solutions out there to try to manage a business. But again, big or small or in between, there's really, up until recently, there's not been a good software application to help manage that business. Challenge number 5, you're going to see a slide next on this. Our industry is horrible at identifying ADAS technologies and required calibrations. Horrible. I'm going to show you some stats in a minute. And challenge number 6, the unknown. No one knows what the future is going to be with regard to ADAS and calibrations. People are saying, well, the systems are going to auto-calibrate themselves. Well, I haven't seen anything that says that. People are saying, well, it's going to be all dynamic and not static. And again, I haven't seen any statistics that tell me that either. Matter of fact, Honda, in their latest Civic, allows that. I think it's the blind spot. I think that's what it is in the rear, allows either dynamic or static. And my gut feeling tells me that's the future of sensors, is having the ability to do both. Okay. So those are the challenges, but I want to focus on what I think is one of the biggest challenges. It's challenge number 5. And from my perspective, again, this is just me. I think our entire industry is failing at accurately identifying, documenting, accurately repairing, accurately calibrating, and accurately validating that a safety system and the vehicle safety systems operate as designed before that vehicle is purchased, sold, repaired, or calibrated. And the numbers speak for themselves. Repairify did a study in 2020, identified 85% of the vehicle estimates that they looked at needed a calibration that didn't have one. In February 2022, Scott Caboose is now with ICAR, made a statement in a magazine that said they went to CCC last year, looked at a year of Honda repair orders within CCC, and found that 80% of the Hondas that they looked at needed a calibration, did not get one. CCC's most recent numbers, appraisal data shows only 16% of repairable appraisals on current year or newer shows that included a line item for calibration, reprogramming, or flashing. Major issue in our industry. Okay, now it's gonna wash out over time, but how many vehicles are on the road today that need a calibration and haven't got one? A whole bunch. So this is a major challenge. So let's move on now. Let's talk about the facility. Because again, I believe that if you're going to do calibrations properly, you can't do them in the parking lot. You can't do them under a tree. You can't do them in space there isn't enough space to perform and have the targets at the proper distance. You can't do them in a space that has shitty, excuse my French, has crappy lighting. You can't do it in a space that has metal all over the place that's in front of the radar. So there's a lot of things you have to take into consideration regarding where you're going to do your calibrations. So let's talk about the facility. Okay. So again, the information I'm showing you, you're going to see some live information and some printed information. What you see here on the screen, this is our company's opinion that if you're going to do 10 or more calibrations or ADAS services a day, you need at least 4,000 square feet. And by the way, what you're going to see from our numbers towards the end, if you ain't doing 10 or more calibrations a day, you ain't making money at it. So again, ADAS calibrations in our mind is a volume business that you're going to need to do a lot to make money on, okay? And again, we believe that the facility should have 3 bays that you can work in, should have an alignment or calibration bay. Again, we're going to talk about alignments here in a minute. If you're going to do 10 a day, you're going to need a second calibration bay, okay? You're going to need a third bay for miscellaneous stuff because guess what happens? Sometimes you got to repair the brackets. Sometimes you got to pull the bumpers off. I mean, all that. And if you want to have an office in the training area, you need those 2. So, when you start to talk about an ADAS facility, again, you need at least 4,000 square feet. You're going to see a couple real facilities in today's presentation that are much bigger than that. Okay. Look, again, you shouldn't have any light obstructions. You should have the least amount of outside light sources. So again, when people tell me they're doing this stuff in the parking lot, they ain't doing them right. I'm sorry. All right, let's move on now to the bays. Again, if you're going to be in a facility, your calibration bays need to be 10 by 15 meters in width by length, and they should be flat. Now, again, Jeff Peavy and I have had a couple conversations, as many of you well know. ICAR's building a training center in Chicago, and I can't wait till Jeff comes out with more details. But he said how difficult it was to get a level floor in the training facility in ICAR. But again, what you're hearing from most of the OEMs, you need to have a flat space. Now, there are some pieces of equipment out there that say they take in account, you can change the equipment for the angle or for the inaccuracy of the floor, maybe. Also, when it comes to the bays, the floor should be painted neutral tone, be clean, and you should be able to ride on it if you're going to follow specific procedures. Lighting should be evenly diffused, should be able to be adjusted based on the seasons, the weather, and the time. As we all know, the way light is generated throughout the year, it changes based on where the sun's at. Okay, and so that's important. Also, the bulb should be a certain number of lumens. It should be adjustable LED. You can read the bullet points here. So again, it's not just putting a few lights up, putting a few incandescent lights up, and opening up a calibration center. That's not how it works. So lighting's important. So again, we talked about bays, talked about lighting. Now let's talk about the walls. The walls should be solid matte color, bay, gray, light gray, or white. The minimum amount of reflections and shadows, okay, should not have any patterns, because if you look at patterns on, if you look at calibration targets, they're patterns, and you don't want to confuse the sensors you're calibrating with patterns behind the patterns. Okay, you shouldn't have reflective surfaces. If you're dealing with radar, it could affect the radar. So anyway, again, facility walls should be solid color, gray, beige, light gray, white, whatever. Okay. So what I want to do now is I want to show you some pictures of some real facilities, a couple of them anyway. Okay. The first one is one of our customers down in Texas. And they're a great team, by the way, great team at Precision ADAS Calibrations, really smart bunch of young people, great people. Let's take a look at their facility. And this is the facility where they do ADAS calibrations and alignments. So again, this is the front, this is their lobby. They did it right. I mean, they really did it right. And now let's take a look at a couple of facilities internal, what it looks like inside. So on the left, you see Liability's calibration center, and on the right, you see our customer's calibration center on the right. And you'll notice in both cases, those targets are organized in a specific way. So the people in the organization know what to look for. And again, you'll notice on the right, they're actually, the targeting systems are actually identified with the OEM manufacturer at the top. So there's a couple of pictures there. Here's a couple more pictures. And this is from Liability's again in Minneapolis. Again, look at the floor, look at the walls, look at the targets. And again, organization in terms of the tools. Again, you can see a vehicle there, again, in the process of being calibrated as well. So that again, some pictures from real facilities, so that I'm not full of crap when I'm saying, this is what facilities should look like. Okay. So, but now there are scenarios, okay, where, wait a minute, my customer, maybe you can do some calibrations in ADAS services mobile. So the question is, can you go mobile? Well, again, real important to consider what are the personnel skills? Are they calibrations only? Can they do calibrations and scanning? Are they going to do programming? Are you also going to offer AC services, mechanical services, right? So that's, if you're going to go into that business, you need to look at what services you're going to offer. And then, of course, you got to look at the cost, right? The vehicle, the maintenance, the insurance, the equipment. Because remember, if you're going to have a facility and you're going to have mobile, you're going to have multiple pieces of equipment for both. You're going to need targets for both, diagnostic tool, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Now, if you're going to go to the customer's facility, so remember what I said earlier, 80% of collision centers don't have the space to do it. So one of the things you need to consider if you're going to do mobile calibrations at other shops is, do they have the space? Or now there's also been, conversations that go on like, look, you come at a specific time of day, we'll clear out the shop and then you perform the services. Well, that's an option, right? But my comment to the mobile / calibration provider is that how you're going to organize your business around a specific customer who's going to be available a specific time, unless of course their volume is high enough. All right. So again, if you're going to do it at their location, what's their space? What's their lighting? What's their lighting? Who's doing the who's checking the alignments? Are they doing the alignments? Are they sending them out? Okay. What's the availability of the space? And again, if you're going to do mobile, you got to send the right technician to the right job. You've got to make sure they're able to get the detailed documentation at the same type of detailed documentation at the shop as if they were in the facility. And of course, you need proper and accurate invoice. So again, if you're considering mobile, these are some of the things to consider. All right. Now, let's talk about the tools. Well, when you're in the ADAS services and calibration business, there's several different tools that need to be considered for the business. First and foremost, one of the most important tools is an OEM and aftermarket diagnostic tool and or software. In my opinion, you probably need both. And in my opinion, you probably need multiple aftermarket tools because they all have limitations. So again, up to you, but this is one of the most important tools. And we'll talk a little bit more about OEM services in a minute, but you got to be in the game. You got to have the right tool. And by the way, whatever tools you get, they need to be updated and up to date. You're not going to do 2022 calibrations with 2021 software. So they need to keep the tools up to date. All right, let's talk about targeting systems. So again, there's a laundry list of targeting system companies out there. There's Bosch, there's Launch, there's Autel, there's John Bean, there's Mosaic, there's okay. So targets are going to be one of the most expensive and variable parts of the business, depending on what vehicles you're calibrating, depending on what systems you want to calibrate. The other thing you must keep in mind when it comes to targets is you probably need an annual budget because those targets will change. Now, in some cases, you can print your own. Again, your choice. But again, this critical, you got to have the right targets. They need to be the right size. And so really important critical piece of the ADAS services calibration business. And by the way, again, if you're going to do mobile and facility-based, you're going to need multiple sets of targets. And if you're going to do more than 10 calibrations a day in a facility, you're going to need more than one set of targets. So just some thoughts. All right. Other accessories. Again, you've got night vision accessories. You've got radar accessories. You've got other target accessories you're going to need to invest in to properly calibrate other systems like radar, night vision, et cetera, et cetera. So again, another investment for your business if you're going to get into the business, okay? Another thing I strongly recommend to anybody who's going to be in the ADAS services and calibration business is you probably need either A, OEM tools for the vehicles that you feel that you're going to have the most number of vehicles in your facility, or you need to have a subscription to an OEM remote diagnostic platform. And believe it or not, there's 5 today. Okay, I remember when I started back at Aztec, there were 2. Now there's 5. Now, in addition to these remote diagnostic companies who are doing remote diagnostic pre- and post scanning, they're now offering remote calibrations. And in some cases, they're actually giving you targets for free, or in some cases for a low dollar amount, but they split the revenue with you in your shop. And so, the question you have to ask is, first of all, if they're going to give you the equipment for your shop, does your shop have the space for the equipment to properly perform the calibrations? I mean, you're going to decide that, right? Anyway, so again, my opinion is you're going to need some OEM tools, you're going to need a OEM remote diagnostics, and there's 5 providers out there today. You need to make that decision for your own business, okay? So that's remote diagnostics. Next, look, alignments and calibrations are like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. In most cases, the vehicle needs to at least have an alignment check before a calibration is done. Now, and in some cases, if you do a wheel alignment on a vehicle, you must do a calibration. So that's why in a real environment, in a real ADAS services and calibration environment, it's our opinion, you got to have an alignment solution. Now, I've got a lot of mobile companies that say, well, it's on the shop. The shop's got to get it aligned first. Okay, so let's talk about that workflow. Okay, the shop gets done. The shop now, they do their post scan, and now they're going to send it out for alignment. And so now they're at the mercy of the alignment company. And now the alignment company brings it back. Now they're going to call the calibration provider and say, hey, I just got this car back. I need this calibration done now. Because everything, all the calibration companies I talk to, everything's ASAP. So again, in my world, this is me. If you're going to be in the calibration ADAS services business, you got to be in the alignment business, or you better have an alignment company right next to yours that's working with you. Because alignments and calibrations go hand in hand. If the vehicle is not aligned correctly, there's a good chance that the ADAS systems aren't going to work correctly either. Okay. All right. Last picture, last images of some tools again in real facilities. Okay. Again, some examples. You can look at the targets on the top left. You can look on the top right. You've got the alignment equipment in the bay. Bottom right, you've got, again, a technician at Lametries working on diagnostics. You can see the one in the bottom middle, again, connected to the vehicle, Mazda. And again, you can look to the left bottom. That's again at PPAC, where they've got the Hunter alignment rack in their business, doing some adjustments on the vehicle. So there's a little bit of overview of the tools and the equipment. Again, that's when I started this thing saying, look, it ain't just about the targets. There's a lot of things that go into operating at ADAS services and calibration business than just targets. A lot of things. All right, now let's talk about workflow and processes, all right? Because again, if you're going to be performing ADAS services and calibration for other businesses, the workflow is different than doing it yourself. So let's talk about it. So we have a belief here that there are 7 moments of truth when it comes to repairing and calibrating ADAS equipped vehicles. Moment of truth number 1 is identifying the ADAS systems, components, component locations, required calibrations, and calibration triggers as early in the process as possible. Ideally, you do it with the consumer there so you can explain to the consumer, which is moment of truth number 2, is explain to the consumer what's on their car, what may occur in terms of because of the sensor damage, why it needs a calibration, why it may take longer, et cetera, et cetera. Also, moment of truth number 3 is a proper, quick, and accurate repair plan. So if I know what's on the vehicle up front, if I know the calibrations that are needed up front, if I know the location of the components, if I've communicated to the customer, I should be able to write a good, accurate, complete repair plan. Now, once I've done that, obviously I'm then going to repair the car correctly. Now, the next step is, in this big, small, or in-between size calibration businesses, one of the things that, in my opinion, is broke is there's really no easy way to order or schedule ADAS calibrations in the business. Yeah, there's websites, there's forms, there's phone numbers, there's text messages, but there really is no easy way today to order and schedule. Because think about it. If again, repair gets done, the repair gets post-scanned, the repair gets reassembled, and then they say, hey, I need a calibration. They're calling their calibration provider. And I need it done ASAP. Well, a lot of calibration providers say, we'll be there in 24 hours. So another important thing is in that step, that scheduling step, is the provider needs to understand what was done to the car. Because my experience tells me, and this goes back to my Aztec days, between 20 and 30% of the vehicles that request a calibration from a calibration provider can't be calibrated for a litany of things. The sensor was disconnected, the bracket was bent, blah, 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 blah. So again, moment of truth number 1, identification quickly, early of everything. Moment of truth number 2, communication with the customer. Moment of truth number 3, proper repair plan. Moment of truth number 4, ordering and scheduling your ADAS services and calibrations. Moment of truth number 5 is, and 6 and 7 is documentation, documentation, and documentation. You're going to hear me talk about this a little later. ADAS and calibrations affect acceleration, braking, and steering. If that doesn't generate a liability concern in your part, it should. And so when it comes to calibrations and ADAS services, in our opinion, everything that's done on that vehicle must be documented, from the pre-calibration steps to the documentation results to the post-repair, post-calibration verification tests. Everything should be documented. So those are the 7 moments of truth from our perspective. All right, let's talk about pricing and getting paid. And like I said, again, we're not talking about pricing in the market. I want to talk about ways people can organize their pricing. So today, there was one train of thought when we started in this business, and it was, let's organize our services by service type. And again, you can see an example here of this is our software pricing module, but you can see here, this is a customer who they've organized their services based on their service, right? So they organize it by AC, calibration, stagnant, blah, 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 okay? And so this is one way to do it. And so then when you or the customer request their service, they're going to say, I want a calibration, I want a diagnostics, or whatever. But what we're finding out now more recently is we believe there's a better way. We believe the better way to organize and to present your pricing and ADAS service and calibration pricing is by manufacturer. Now, why are we finding this to be better? Well, number one, each manufacturer is going to have a different set of calibration opportunities, right? I mean, Ford's going to have different calibrations than BMW, which are going to have different calibrations than GM, et cetera, et cetera. So by organizing it under manufacturer, you now can organize the type of calibrations underneath the manufacturer and then the associated pricing with those services. And by the way, we're also finding that by you doing this and presenting this, but for the calibration provider doing this and presenting it to its customers, the customers they pick it up quicker because they know what kind of car they're working on. Instead of worrying about calibrations and so on, and you're going to see this in a minute, they're going to pick their vehicle and they're going to pick their service. All right, so again, 2 ways to do it. One is categorization by service. Again, our recommendation most recently is categorization by OEM manufacturer. Now, the other thing about ADAS services and calibrations, you need to make it easy for your customers to order your services. So one of the things that we've done recently is we now allow a calibrations customer to select the services they need for their business. So here's an example of a customer portal where the customer selected Ford, and now they're presented with all of the calibration provider services. Okay. You'll also notice, by the way, a little quote down here, they're also provided with the ability to create their own quote. And for those of you who are on the webinar, and those of you who deal with insurance companies, there are some insurance companies that require a quote early on in the process. So this is one of the reasons why we do that. But anyway, so you need to make it easy for your customers to order your services. So in this case, the customer is going to pick Ford, and then they're going to pick the service they need. Okay. And again, they're going to know what it's going to cost. Here it is as they add it up. Because remember, you're providing your service pricing to the customer. And so now it's transparency, right? It's sort of like, going online and getting your plane ticket. Now they're going online and getting their calibration services and pricing. And again, real quick, real easy way to do it. And then, so I know what some of you are thinking, well, these shops, they don't know anything. They don't know what they need. They don't know what they want. Well, if they've done all the work right up front, they've identified the systems, they've identified the calibrations, they've communicated with the customer, they've got all the documentation associated with it, and they've written a proper and accurate repair plan, sure they do. But that's in theory. So again, we know in reality, that's not the case. So a lot of our customers, what they do is they add a request estimate, and instead of picking one of these, they say request an estimate. The calibration provider gets that estimate and returns it with an authorization for them to approve it. So again, from a pricing perspective, organization, you can organize it by category or by OEM. And again, we believe it's better done by manufacturer. Okay, billing and accounting is also important, right? So when you're done with the service, You want accurate, detailed billing, not one-line stuff that says calibration $500. Because to me, you're not telling me anything you did with regard to the proper performance of what you've done. Okay. So again, on the left is an example of a detailed invoice. And then, by the way, if you're in the ADAS calibration business, you need to manage your business. You need to understand your sales, your profits, your trends, et cetera, et cetera. So you need to have a tool and a process to tell you what you're successful at and what you're not successful at. So, you know, you need to count, you need to see if you're winning or losing the game with regard to your sales and profitability. So again, getting paid, part of that is billing properly and counting your money when the work is done. All right, so that's pricing, getting paid. I want to talk now about ADAS calibration and software. So again, guys and girls, if you look back at a little history, you know, I joined Aztec in 2017, and you know, I forget how many. I think we had 35 employees. I forget how many customers we had, but that was the beginning. That was 2017, right? It's only 5 years later, and calibrations are just starting to come to the forefront. And if you think about what we're doing today as a business, no one's taken the leap to build any software related to help the industry manage the 7 moments of truth. Again, I will tell you, I've talked to hundreds of companies that are either getting into the business, wanting to get into the business, are in the business. None of them have a good solution in terms of how does it help me manage all steps in the process, drive the process, and give me what I need. So let's talk about what we believe the proper software should be for an ADAS services and calibration business. Well, number one, it needs to help their customers and themselves identify and locate ADAS technologies, triggers, and required calibrations. Number two, it should help their customers, the shops, educate the consumer about the ADAS on their cars. Number three, we talked about this in repair planning. It should help the shop create better, faster, and more accurate repair plans. Step number four, it should make it easy for the customer, the shop, to do business with the ADAS service and calibration company. Number five, it should manage all workflows. Number six, it should generate and share and store detailed documentation for all aspects of the workflow and business. It's our belief that any documentation that the ADAS service provider adds into their file, the customer, the shop should have the exact same information at the exact same time. And of course, last but not least, it needs to help them operate a successful business. So let's talk about, again, something we've worked on. If you're going to accurately identify, communicate, and then share this information with repair planning, you got to do it early. And so our world is you scan the VIN, you get the information, you identify what's on the vehicle, you identify the calibration triggers, and now you go to work. Now you go to work. Now you have that information in front of you before I even start the repair plans. Again, if I don't use a mobile app and I'm working on a web portal, again, I want to identify the components, the locations, the type of calibrations required. And I want to do that in seconds. I don't want to do it in 30 minutes and 20 minutes. I want to do it in seconds. And then I also, if I'm going to do this properly, I want to know all the position statements related to ADAS and calibrations for that manufacturer. I want easy access to that manufacturer's information systems. I want easy access to videos. I want easy access to that OEM's owner manuals. So again, that's the kind of information you need upfront to help that shop educate the consumer, sell more ADAS services, write a better and accurate repair plan. So that's step one. Step two, and this is where, because of the 80% that don't have the space, our industry, in our opinion, is going to operate as a hub and spoke when it comes to ADAS services and calibrations. So what does a hub and spoke model mean? Let me use, I could either use any one of the consolidators. Calibers bought a company called ProTech. Gerber bought a company called Mobile Auto Solutions. Crash Champions has bought a company. Classic has bought a company. Joe Hudson has bought a company. They all have gone out and acquired companies to specifically perform ADAS services and calibrations in their marketplaces. So I want you to think about that. The five of the biggest organizations in North America have said, nope, we're going to acquire expertise and we're going to manage ADAS services and calibration different than in our collision centers. For those of you who are on this call, if that doesn't send you a message, it should. And so when you look at those models, it's a hub and spoke model, which means I've got 10 stores in an area. I've got an organization in that area that's servicing those 10 stores or 12 stores or 5 stores. Or if I'm my own MSO and I've got 5 stores, why wouldn't I create my own hub and spoke for those 5 stores with a company that's supporting those 5 stores? And so if the world is going to be a hub and spoke model, you need a software platform that handles a hub and spoke model. And today in North America, there's only one platform that does that, and that's our Calibration Copilot platform. And so the idea is you connect the stores with the hub, and all of the communication, all of the documentation, everything that goes on between the customers and the shop happens in the same platform. And it allows that platform, that organization, to be local, regional, or national. It allows that hub to create and manage their own customers, create and manage their own services, description, pricing, and discounts, automate invoicing, manage technicians, manage dispatching, go through the list here. Because again, if 80% of our industry doesn't have the space, I got to have someone to do the work for me, and it's going to end up to be a hub and spoke model. It's got to handle supplements, because remember, a shop may send, I want one ADAS calibration, and by the way, our stats tell us the average vehicle needs 1.7 calibrations, so I need to manage those supplements. I got to share documentation. I got to provide detailed documentation. I need to integrate with CCC all data on other third-party apps. I need operational and financial management as well. So again, if I'm going to be in the business, I need a software platform. All right, and so that's the piece of getting the work done. And then the last step is, and this floors me, by the way, because I started this journey on this type of software over 2 years ago. How can any organization look a customer in the face, give them the keys to an ADAS equipped vehicle without providing them with validation and documentation? They accurately tested, they validated those ADAS systems operate before they give the keys back to the consumer. I'm still dumbfounded by our industry that isn't doing that. So our belief is you need a third platform. You need ADAS safety system verification software. And that means, number one, providing OEM ADAS verification procedures that tells the user how to verify the systems operate as they're supposed to. You need to record that drive. And then you need to document that the systems passed, failed, or weren't on the vehicle. And then you need to provide the customer, whether it's the shop who's your customer or the consumer who's the customer, you need to provide them with documentation that what you actually did worked. I actually did take the car for a test drive. I actually did check everything off. It actually did pass or fail. So again, to me, I'm still dumbfounded by our industry who's delivering ADAS equipped vehicles after repair, after calibration, and they're not giving the customer validation that they tested it. And here's what they're going to say. Well, I got no DTCs and my calibration equipment said it was okay. Sorry, just because there are no DTCs and just because the calibration equipment says it's okay does not mean that vehicle software or ADAS safety systems are going to operate as designed. Does not mean that at all. And so if you're not validating the vehicle operates as designed after repair, shame on you. All right, let's go to documentation. Okay, so you start to talk about documentation again. Acceleration, braking, steering, okay? So here's a laundry list of what we believe needs to be documented, okay? You need to have what was on the car, what components are on the car, what triggers a calibration, why does it need a calibration? You need pre and post scans, you need repair order lines, you need a health scan performed by the ADAS service and calibration company before they do their work. You need images. You need images of the vehicle. You can look at the list here. You need the calibration result report. You need a verification test result report. You need a detailed invoice. You should have a workflow report, and you should have a scan report after the vehicle test drive. So those are the type of documentation you should have. Here's an example of documentation that shows all the components on a car, all the required calibrations on the car, some of the calibration requirements in terms of space and equipment. So if you're going to do a calibration and you don't have documentation that this car has certain equipment, who's to believe whom? So again, you need to document what's on the car. Next, you need images. Okay, vehicle comes in or you're at the car doing work, you should have a pre-check list of things you want images of. Here's an example of our platform. These are pre-checked that we're saying you need pictures, you need a cluster, you need a picture of the setup and targets. And then you're saying, okay, how do I get those images? Well, we do that with a mobile app. You take that mobile app, you use that mobile app, you take the images, you check off what you did, and all of those images become part and parcel of the platform for both the calibration company and the customer of the shop. All right, what's a workflow report? Well, again, this is our belief is anything you're doing with regard to ADAS calibrations and ADAS services need to be documented. And so in our world, we have checklists, pre-checklist, post-checklist, and other things that anytime something is done within a system, we time and date stamp it. So we know when it was done, who did it, and so on. So again, we believe that documentation is critical, again, because of steering, acceleration, and braking. And then, of course, you need a detailed invoice. We talked about that. You need a detailed invoice detailing what you did, and as part of that, what you did, that scan or calibration, what did you really do in terms of outline? And again, we just covered this. You need a safety system verification test documentation. We need the OEM verification test to validate that what we did. And again, of course, you're going to want documentation that your business is operating successfully. All right, liability. What's the liability? Okay, well, again, you've heard me say this. You're going to hear me say this forever and ever. ADAS, calibrations, acceleration, braking, and steering. So if an ADAS system feature fails, who's to blame? If it left their facility, who's to blame? Did the driver turn it off? Is it because the OEM, the system didn't work? Is it because the shop didn't validate the systems on the drive? Is it the insurer? Again, without documentation, you don't know. How do you, again, I'm still dumbfounded. How can you deliver a vehicle to a consumer without proper documentation explaining what you did? I mean, it's amazing to me. So I said this, by the way, what you're about to see next. I said this for multiple years. Any repair facility, and particularly ones who are working with the ADAS and service calibration, you need to document the process as if you were going to court tomorrow. It's that critical. It's that critical. Everything you do should be documented. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about the investment. Now, what I'm about to show you are this is information collected from multiple places and put in one area. Depending on what you're going to invest in and what kind of equipment you're going to use, you're going to find your investment's probably going to be different. But again, here's some of the things you got to consider: your facility, your targeting system, your targets, your quick check, alignment quick check system, your alignment system, your tool. Again, you can go through the list. Okay. If you're going mobile, you got another thing to worry about there. You know, so if you're going to go all in, all right, if you're going to have a facility and mobile, you're probably at 250, 300 grand. You could probably get into it for a minimum modest investment of 150 grand. So this is not, buy a set of targets and I'm in business. I said that earlier. That ain't the case. Okay. So let's talk about the ROI. Again, these are using our numbers. Again, your numbers are going to be a little different probably. Let's talk about the ROI. And I want you to look at the bottom because there's a couple of things to remember. We believe that when you're going to start making money when you're starting to do over 10 calibrations a day. you're going to start to make money. Okay. Will you squeak out on 4 or 5 a day? Sure. But you're not going to make any serious money at 4 or 5 a day. You're going to make a little bit of money. You're going to stay above ground, but above water, but you're not going to make any serious money. But you get into serious money when you can do 20 a day, 100 a month, 100 a week, 400 a month, 4,800 a year. This is where you make the serious money. Okay. Now, so how do you target those shops, those customers? Well, what I tell shops is if you're going into a market, target the three to 10 customers in the market that repair 100 vehicles a month. And you're going to get 25 to 40% of those vehicles are going to need a calibration. If you give the shop the tools to properly identify it, they're going to sell this themselves. So there's a high ROI when you start to put volume into the ADAS calibration business. All right, so there you have it. In 49 minutes and 55 seconds, I've covered a lot of ground, and again, sponsored by our company. Now, I see a couple of chat people in the chat. Here we go. Okay. Hey, Sean, how are you, sir? Good to see you. Good to see you here. I use for my DAS. From time to time, I am unable to calibrate using this tool, so I have an ASTIC tool to calibrate. That being said, my price points may change as a result of aftermarket or OEM calibrations. How would this program allow for that change? All right, so Sean, I'll talk about the program. I won't talk about pricing, but you'll be able to price depending on how you want to configure your pricing. You can do it for either aftermarket or OEM. So I think that would solve your problem there. John, how are vehicles moved to the calibration center following repair? Rollback, charge for tow? Great question, John. All of the above. I mean, in some cases, it's driven from the shop, driven by the shop to the facility. In some cases, it's picked up by the center at the shop and driven back, and then driven back to the shop to do a verification test. And so all of the above. If it has to be towed, it's towed, et cetera, et cetera. So we typically recommend either you're going to do it in the shop, the shop's going to drive it, the center's going to pick it up, or it's going to be towed. Those are the typical 4 or 5 that we recommend. Okay, here we have another question. Is there any OEM statement in your program that certifies the system is calibrated to OE standards? So is there any OE statement in your program that certifies the system is calibrated to OEM standards? So my answer to this would be the only tool, the documentation that would provide you with the answer here, this would either be the OEM tool and the targets, or this would be an aftermarket tool and the targets that's associated with OEM processes. So that's going to be the calibration result report. Okay. Also, by the way, I think the other part of the report that's going to prove it was done in OEM statements is the imaging. Are the targets set a particular distance from the vehicle? Are there markings on the floor? Or are there some systems on the reports that actually show the distance to millimeters and so on and so forth. So hopefully that answers your question. But typically it's going to be your calibration report. That's typically going to be the one either from the aftermarket tool or from the OEM tool and the calibration provider's platform. Other questions from anybody on that's still remaining on the call? Okay, we got one from Michael. Michael, I'm looking to run a glass department at the same ADAS calibration facility in a separate bay. Is that something you would recommend? My quick answer, Michael, is if you have the space. That's my quick answer, right? I can't see why not, as long, again, as if you have the space. I'm not a glass expert, so I don't know how much space, if you're going to run a glass department in a facility. I don't know the spacing requirements or what equipment you're going to need. But if it's going to give you the right space to do the calibrations and ADAS services, why not, right? Just, why not? Any other questions from anybody? So let me stop and say, hopefully for all of you who are on this call for the last 58 minutes, it was worth your time. I hope it was really worth your time, because this is, in my opinion, this is the big thing today that our industry is dealing with. And if we don't get this right, and I'm talking about shops, insure everybody. If we don't get this right, you think the John Eagle thing was bad? I mean, if the ADAS stuff doesn't stop, doesn't steer or properly, we got major problems. So anyway, again, I got 1 minute left. If you don't have any more questions, again, thank you so much for taking the time to participate. Again, I hope it was worth your time and effort. And if you're going to SEMA, see you there. If not, also, if you want any other information, the information's on the screen here. You can reach out. You can visit our autotechcelerators.com website, where we have a free ADAS calibration guide. All of our product websites are up here, and our email and phone numbers on here. So again, thank you all very much. I appreciate your time and your interest during today.